Video game industry is in a weird place right now. Seems like no matter where you look, things are overwhelmingly negative. And that's whether you're a fan of Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, or PC gamer. There's a clear negative sentiment toward the industry as a whole from longtime players, what I would call traditional hardcore gamers. Now sure, this has been the norm for a while when it comes to online keyboard warriors, especially on social media and especially within the gaming industry. But I don't know, man, things definitely feel like they've ramped up over the past year or so. And I would say at least some of this anger is justified. The industry is rapidly changing before our eyes, and I think many of us would say it's not changing in a positive way. Game studios are shutting down left and right, beloved franchises are being ruined by questionable design choices, and somehow games are getting more expensive while offering less value. We're now several months into the launch of a brand new system with the Switch 2, and I keep hearing some of the same things. Complaints about game keycards, frustration with aggressive DLC practices, and confusion about Nintendo's pricing strategy. Now here's the thing, I actually bought a Switch 2 at launch, and don't hate me, but I've been enjoying it. My kids and I had a blast with Mario Kart World, and I do still hop on occasionally for races from time to time. It's not a game I'm playing every day, certainly, maybe not even every week, but whenever I hop on, I do still enjoy it. Donkey Kong Bonanza, I still haven't beaten yet. It's an outstanding 3D platformer, and I'm kind of steadily making my way through that one. I've also gone back to some of my favorite Switch 1 games, and even picked up No Man's Sky for the first time. So this video is not coming from somebody who regrets their Nintendo Switch 2 purchase, or is just looking for reasons to hate on Nintendo. I'm actually really enjoying the system so far. In fact, I think for anyone who says they have a problem with the amount of games on the Switch 2, I just really don't agree. I mean, look at past launches of not only Nintendo systems, but launches in general. I would say it's on par with many of them, if not slightly better. Now, in terms of the quantity of games, I honestly think we have too many games across the entire industry right now. It's just overwhelming the amount of choice we have. To me, any complaints about not enough games on the Switch 2 are way more of a content creator problem than a problem for the everyday person with a job, school, or family responsibilities. Now, if you want to talk about true exclusives being a bit lacking for the Switch 2, then I could somewhat agree with that. At the same time, this is almost always how it goes for early adopters on any new hardware. Now, before we get into some critique, let's give Nintendo a bit of credit here. I do think they've done a solid job with giving free updates for better performance on a lot of Switch 1 titles. On the flip side of that, we also have these Switch 2 edition games, and the pricing there is a bit frustrating, but at least I will say there's an upgrade path for those who already own the original game. I still wish some of the basic things like better frame rates would just be part of a free update, especially when it comes to games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But honestly, if I had to pick my single biggest issue with the Switch 2 so far, it's actually an issue I had with the first system, and that's the ergonomics. This thing is just so darn uncomfortable in handheld mode. It does feel better than the original, which I pointed out back in my initial unboxing. It feels way more premium overall. Then I had some hopes that I wouldn't even need to buy a grip for the system, but after trying to use it for just a few days, those hopes were quickly destroyed. When you play with this thing for longer than, I would say, half an hour, it's just really frustrating to hold. I think the biggest issue here is there's just nothing on the back of the Joy-Cons for you to grip onto. It's not at all like a traditional gaming controller, for example. Maybe it's just a me problem, I don't know. In fact, looking back on all the portable systems I've owned over the years, I don't know that I would call any of them truly comfortable, especially for long play sessions. The original 3DS was just so freaking uncomfortable for me, I had to sell it. I couldn't even keep the thing. The PS Vita wasn't bad, and despite how goofy the PlayStation Portal looks, maybe Sony's onto something there with just smacking a screen in the middle of a standard controller. I mean, has any gaming company ever gotten this right? What about for you Steam Deck owners out there? I actually haven't tried that one yet. That one looks pretty ergonomic to me, but I also know it's a bit heavier, so not sure how that all balances out. With the original Switch, I use the Satisfy grip, and I have finally gotten the new Satisfy, the Zen Grip 2, not sponsored at all. I just love the products, have been using them, well, on the Switch, and then I've just got this one the other day for the Switch 2, and it actually makes this thing usable for more than like 30 minutes at a time. And it's all about the handles here. Oh, and speaking of the Switch OLED, by the way, I definitely do miss the premium display. The Switch 2 screen isn't horrible by any means. In fact, just last night, I played a couple of hours of Donkey Kong Bonanza. I love having the resolution bump. It is just such a weird feeling, though, to have everything else on this new system feel like a premium upgrade compared to the original Switch. I mean, when you go back to the original Joy-Cons, for example, they just feel like these little plastic toys. And I know Switch 2 Joy-Cons are plastic as well, but it's just a much more premium feel overall. When you go back to the screen, though, if you're coming from the OLED, that is, it's just clearly an inferior display now on the Switch 2. Nintendo also hyped up the HDR capabilities of the new system, but the built-in display is not great for HDR. I definitely recommend turning that off for handheld play. And again, I don't want to make it sound like it's just a horrible display because it's not a bad display. It's just not nearly as good as the OLED. Speaking of things that are bad though, the battery life on the Switch 2, look, it's terrible. And I don't think I've heard anyone just outright say it's terrible, but it is. We've taken it on a couple of family trips, and even with airplane mode turned on and the brightness lowered, it's really hard to get much more than about 2 hours out of this thing. I know the hardware is way more powerful here, yes, I get it, but it is a big step back on the battery life compared to the Switch OLED. I mean, 2 hours is just not nearly enough, in my opinion, for something claiming to be a portable system. For comparison, even the Steam Deck OLED reportedly gets between like 3 and 5 hours, depending on what game you're playing, sometimes pushing games that are even more demanding than what we're seeing on Switch 2. And again, if you don't have a grip on your Switch 2, I don't see how you could play for longer than 2 hours anyway without your hands cramping. All right, to be fully fair to Nintendo here, I've personally spent way more of my time playing in docked mode anyway. And here, I will say I've been pretty impressed with the Switch 2. Donkey Kong Bonanza looks gorgeous on the big screen. The level design is incredible, and honestly, it's a joy to play. The frame rate, it's mostly solid, but there are times in that game when the frame rate just really suffers, and I get it. There's all the destructible environments and everything going on. For the most part, I will say that it is solid, though. Mario Kart World, despite my issues with its pricing, which we'll get to in a bit, genuinely plays and looks fantastic. I mean, the racing feels tight and responsive. I love the new mechanics. I think they're such a welcome addition to the traditional Mario Kart formula. In fact, I wish they were a little bit more important for doing well in races, which I think is one of the big complaints from a lot of people. I also know people are having issues with the new track system and how it's harder to do those traditional 3-lap races, especially when you're playing online. For me personally, I've never been someone who just like grinds Mario Kart repeatedly, so it hasn't been a huge issue for me, but I can absolutely see for someone who really kind of takes Mario Kart seriously and wants to play it almost in a professional-like sense, I can see how that would be frustrating. I also have to give Nintendo credit on the backward compatibility here because I've been pretty impressed with how much better some of my older Switch 1 games run on the new hardware. In fact, the only reason I ended up buying No Man's Sky is because I saw a post from Sean Murray about how the game was getting a free update for Switch 2, and it just had all sorts of performance improvements. Nintendo, of course, has also provided free updates for a bunch of first-party titles. Games like Super Mario Odyssey, Link's Awakening, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet all got patches that take advantage of the Switch 2's hardware. And again, these were completely free updates. You don't have to buy anything extra. If you own the game on Switch 1, you just download the update and get better performance. That's actually how it should work, honestly. When you have more powerful hardware, the older games should benefit from it. For a lot of Switch 1 titles, that's exactly what happened. Some of them, they actually didn't even need an update. They just ran better naturally thanks to the power of the Switch. Okay, but here's now where we're going to take a shift and things get a little bit complicated because some games got free updates, others took a different approach. Games like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Super Mario Party Jamboree, and Tears of the Kingdom all got those Switch 2 editions that we talked about a bit earlier. If you already own those games on Switch 1, you can do an upgrade, which is less than buying the full title outright. This is between $10 and $20, and I think I even saw $30 in the case of some games, depending on how much content is getting added there. But I think it's clear to see how for a lot of consumers, this can get confusing really fast, and some people aren't going to be able to just go and look at every little individual thing and see, okay, what do I have in the original base version, and what am I actually getting here? Is it mainly just performance, or is there actually a significant amount of new content here that's worth the $20 to $30. Now, if you're a brand new player who never owned the Switch 1 version, you're looking at $80 for the whole package. And that can be quite the sticker shock. And look, I get it. These editions include the DLC plus new content in some cases, in addition to performance enhancements. On paper, the value is probably there. The optics, though, for the Nintendo, yeah, I would say they're pretty rough there, especially with everything else going on in the industry, especially with all the headlines about $80 Mario Kart. I mean, when you're scrolling through the eShop and you see $80 next to a Kirby or Mario Party game, it just feels wrong. I mean, even if the math technically works out. But part of that is because Nintendo isn't dropping the price of Switch 1 games. If they were dropping the price of those Switch 1 games, then you could come in at $70 for the full new version on Switch 2. And that's certainly part of a larger gaming industry problem right now, where prices on just about everything, even the old stuff, we're not seeing it come down, which is just insane. I mean, I can't imagine being a kid today as a gamer whose parents don't care about gaming, because when I was growing up, I mean, it was Christmas and birthdays. Those were when I got new games, and you could always count on some games dropping in price and going into that bargain bin. And, you know, despite Nintendo's reputation, they do have eShop sales from time to time, and I actually think people are going to really start being way more conscious of this, whereas before, people would just, you know, buy games with a little bit of disposable income you have, but with everything going up just across the world right now, people are going to have to be way more strategic about what games they buy and when they buy them. In fact, Circana just had some data the other day released that said more than 60% of US game players only buy 2 games or fewer per year. Only 4% of players buy more than 1 game a month. That is incredible. And it's only going to keep going down in terms of how many buy one game per month. And the number of people buying 2 games or fewer per year is probably going to go up. And this is where we need to talk about the bigger issues here, because these pricing decisions, specifically with Nintendo, Switch 2 editions, Upgrade Pass, they're all part of a larger shift in how Nintendo is approaching things with the Switch 2. Mario Kart World is the best example of what I'm talking about here. This game launched at $80. Now, I'm not opposed to games costing $80, especially if they can justify that price point. I mean, if you consider inflation and look at the price of video games over the years, they've actually remained stable for far longer than many would expect them to. The problem with me on Mario Kart World is what exactly justifies the extra cost here. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed my time with it. As I said before, my kids and I, we've had a blast, all that. But when you really break it down, what are we getting for that extra $10 over a standard $70 game? I was willing to give Nintendo the benefit of the doubt at first. I thought, okay, they're only doing Mario Kart World at this pricing, so they must really have some big plans in store for this game. Well, since launch, as many of you know, there hasn't been a lot. I mean, a lot of people have compared it to the launch of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which again was kind of a repackaged version of an older game, so they were able to put more tracks over its lifetime. It got all those DLC packs, and I think near 100 tracks. We're paying more money for not even half the amount of tracks at launch. And here's the kicker. It's now been over 4 months since Mario Kart World's release. We've seen basically zero post-launch support. No new tracks, no additional game modes, a few balance updates here and there is really all we've seen. It's like Nintendo looked at the success of Mario Kart 8 and decided they could charge more for the sequel and then just stop supporting it. And before anybody says, well, they'll probably add DLC later, that's kind of exactly my point. Why should we pay $80 for a game that feels like it should have more content, just to potentially pay more later for what probably should have been included from the start? I mean, how in the world do we have Donkey Kong and Pauline only having 2 styles here? They got their own game. I mean, with the launch of Donkey Kong Bonanza, that was a perfect opportunity to give players of that game new styles for free, do a bit of cross-promotion between games there. Or heck, even give it to everybody for free and just use it as a way to promote the other game. Oh man, speaking of Donkey Kong Bonanza and DLC though, that leads us to another big problem here. Donkey Kong Bonanza launched just a month after the Switch 2, and as I've said, it's a fantastic game. I'm enjoying it a lot. But just a few months after launch, Nintendo dropped a $20 DLC pack for it. $20. Now, I haven't bought it and don't plan to. I can't speak to whether it's worth the money or not. But again, the optics here for Nintendo are just terrible. I mean, the game just came out 2 months after its release, and they're already asking for more money. We thought the price of Mario Kart 8 at $80 was bad. Well, essentially, if you want to buy everything in Donkey Kong right now, it's $90. It feels less like, hey, we made this additional content to extend the life of the game, and more like, yeah, we kind of held this back so we could sell it separately. And here's what really bothers me. This is not an isolated event. It's actually becoming a pattern. At the time of this recording, Pokemon Legends ZA, it's getting ready to release later this month. But yeah, did you know there's already been a $30 DLC that's been announced for it? I mean, you just can't make this up. They've already announced a paid DLC for a game that isn't even finished yet. A game we haven't played. If you want to buy the Switch 2 edition of the game and the DLC, you're looking at $100. Oh, and to further confuse the situation, the main part of this DLC, it actually doesn't release until February 2026. But hey, if you pre-order it now, though, you'll get to immediately unlock in-game apparel items and a luxurious Pokeball set. Yeah, whatever that is. I haven't played Pokemon in years. The main story part of the DLC, though, it doesn't come out until 4 months later. Also, I should point out, it says planned for release by February 28th, so hey, gotta leave that wiggle room just in case you cannot hit that date. And man, Nintendo has to know how this looks. I mean, they have some of the smartest people in the industry. This is not an accident. It's not an oversight. These are deliberate business decisions. I was recently listening to the Kit and Krista podcast, former employees who worked for Nintendo, and they had a really interesting discussion about how when things are going well for Nintendo, they really just don't change anything. It's very difficult to get them to see that, hey, if we keep going down this path, it's going to be a problem in the future. I thought it was such an interesting discussion, and it made clear to me that we're not going to see Nintendo make changes until this actually starts to hit them in the wallet, until they actually see negative side effects for some of these decisions. Now, somehow, we haven't even gotten to the most controversial aspect of the Switch 2's early life. For those who might not know what I'm talking about, game keycards are Nintendo's new approach to some physical game sales. Basically, this is what the vast majority of third parties are using for their Switch 2 games, whereas Nintendo is using traditional game cartridges. Many third parties, not all, but many of them, are opting for game keycards as they're much cheaper to produce. And that comes back to Nintendo, because this time they're only offering 1 game cartridge size for Switch 2 games. With Switch 1, developers could save on the cost of memory required for their games, especially devs of smaller games. games that wouldn't come close to filling up a 64 gig cartridge. With game key cards, you go into a store, buy what looks like a standard physical game, but pop it into your Switch 2, and you're going to be prompted to download the full game. From that point on, your cartridge essentially acts as a key to unlock the digital game each time you want to play. On the positive side, you can resell it, trade it in, let a friend borrow it. You do get some of the benefits of physical media. And this is actually an area where I think Nintendo probably thought this was a great compromise that wouldn't upset too many people, but that has not been the case at all. Because here, the real problem isn't about whether you can trade or resell the item. It's more about game preservation and what could happen years down the line. It's another step toward the all-digital model where you really don't own the game at all, but instead a license to play the game. A license that could technically be revoked at any time. Now, even if this is unlikely, it's not like we haven't seen it happen before. If Nintendo ever shuts down the Switch 2 servers, or if they decided to remove a game from their servers for any reason, that physical game keycard essentially becomes worthless. It's just a piece of plastic that won't unlock anything. Now, to be fair, it would still work if someone already has that game downloaded on their system, but if you accidentally deleted it or you just needed to free up some space, if that game ever ceases to be on the server, then you wouldn't be able to download it again. And I want to be clear here, I am not naive to the fact of an all-digital future. It is happening, it is coming, it's inevitable. I get it. Heck, I personally thought it would come much sooner. I wrote a grad school paper on this nearly 20 years ago. We've seen it with books, movies, music. It's only logical that video games are going to follow in those footsteps. Looking at those three mediums, though, I think is really interesting because I feel like physical books, they're the one that has actually been able to hang on the most despite the massive rise in ebooks. There's still enough of an interest in owning physical books that publishers continue to print them, and at least a handful of bookstores still exist. Man, I really hope gaming follows this path because if you look at movies, yeah, physical media not doing a great job of sticking around there. And I guess one of the advantages that books have is that they began as a physical medium, right? It was something that you could hold in your hand, whereas these others, both music and movies, are digital. They've always been digital. We just had to have some kind of physical device to actually play and watch them. For movies, I knew the writing was on the wall when Best Buy decided to stop carrying physical Blu-rays and DVDs. The music industry probably has the most experience dealing with this. I mean, you go all the way back to Napster, then iTunes, now Spotify and YouTube. It is almost totally digital now, but I will say, even with music, even old formats like vinyl have made a comeback over the past several years. Gaming may very well be in an even more precarious situation, due in large part to platform exclusivity. This is something those other mediums don't have to deal with in quite the same way. Music's had it figured out for a while, and it's taken movies a little bit to get there, but I do think they're getting there to where if you own a digital copy of something, you can pretty much play it, watch it, listen to it on just about any device on multiple platforms, which is great. And gaming is certainly going more in this direction when you look at Microsoft and even Sony actually taking more of their games to PC now. Companies like Nintendo, though, they still have a number of truly exclusive titles just to their platform and just to their hardware. They essentially control everything about how, when, and where we can play those titles, especially if they're digital only or a game key card. Now look, I'm not going to try and tell anybody how to spend your money. If you've bought Mario Kart World at $80 and feel like you got your money's worth, hey, that's totally valid. If you love Donkey Kong enough to buy the DLC day one, more power to you. But I definitely think we need to have honest conversations about some of these trends without immediately jumping to defend Nintendo just because we love their games. And I get it, man. I love Nintendo games. I grew up on Nintendo. Some of my favorite gaming memories are Nintendo. Heck, I just went to Super Nintendo World this summer and had an absolute blast. At the same time, I'm also watching Nintendo very carefully right now. The trends we're seeing, the aggressive DLC practices, the pricing strategies, the game key cards, these aren't just isolated incidents. They're absolutely part of a larger shift in how Nintendo views its customers and its business. And personally, I think it's important for us as consumers to pay attention to these shifts and speak up when we see practices we don't agree with. And perhaps most importantly, vote with your wallet. But what do you guys think, man? Let me know in the comments below whether you agree or disagree. Are you all in on Nintendo right now? Are you kind of in the middle like I am, where you're enjoying the games, but also cautiously watching what they're doing? Or are you just totally out? I've seen a lot of that sentiment online right now. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.